So we're back with more from the explosive testimony of Cassidy Hutchinson, a former aide to Mark Meadows, painting alarming scenes of an angry Trump lashing out as he attempted to hold onto power. Here with me now, Ellie Honig, Alice Stewart, and David Axelrod. Okay, now here's a real conversation. This, you know what, was crazy. I was watching it today, literally, I'm not kidding, with popcorn, because I could not believe that it had gotten to this point. You said that today with testimony, you said it was game-changing. What was so different about today that we learned up until this point?
Because we now have the most direct, most credible link between Donald J. Trump and the violence that erupted at the Capitol on January 6th. Let's think about the speech that Donald Trump gave at the Ellipse. We've all heard it dozens and dozens of times. We're going to go down to the Capitol, you're going to fight like hell, or else we won't have a country anymore. Now think about it in this new context. Now we know that when Donald Trump stood up in front of that crowd and gave that speech, he knew that crowd was armed. He knew that crowd was not there to harm him, and he knew that he wanted them to bring their weapons down to Congress. To me, that changes everything, and one of the things we've been asking is, will there be a link? This is direct.
Let's listen.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and we're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women, and we're probably not going to be cheering so much for some of them, because you'll never take back our country with weakness. You have to show strength, and you have to be strong.
David Axelrod, what do you think of that?
Well, I agree with Ellie. This was damning, but you know what? I want to step back and take a larger perspective on this. I worked in the White House for a couple of years. Every time I walked in there, I felt the history of that place. I felt like I was walking into the citadel of democracy. And I watched that young woman today, 26 years old, like so many of the young people who I saw when I was in Washington, who came there because they believed that they wanted to serve, they believed it was an important thing to do. And I was trying to process how she must have felt, this idealistic kid who got to work in the White House and suddenly was part of gangsterism, of the defiling of democracy. And that must have been crushing. But every single story she told today was chilling about what was going on in that building. And I think we all suspected that. But now we know. Now we know what he was up to, what the people around him were doing and saying. And she painted a picture. And I said from the beginning of this whole process that it was like a game of Wordle and it spells Trump. But now all the letters are filled in. And it's very, very clear.
It's interesting that you said what you said, because when Trump first became president, the concern that I was like, listen, I thought our democracy could handle it, but that he didn't, because he had such little respect for people, the way he conducted himself, right? That he wouldn't have the reverence for the institution of the White House and that was concerning. I couldn't imagine him sitting in the Oval Office because of his behavior.
It's even bigger. I've said this many, many times, but I think this illustrated it today. He does not believe in rules or laws or norms or institutions, and democracy depends on those things. And when you have a president of the United States, imagine what the founding fathers would have thought if they had seen or heard about a president of the United States weaponizing a crowd and sending them to the Capitol to try and interrupt the peaceful transfer of power as dictated by the voters of this country. So, you know, we're focused on Trump. We should be focused on what he did and what the potential liability is for what he did. But we once again have to focus on how close we came to an absolute catastrophe in our democracy, and how much our democracy depends on the goodwill of people who hold these high offices.
Part of what I came across today, peeling back the curtains and seeing what happened, we have all seen and heard and understood what happened out in full view, what is unprecedented and unusual display of stopping the peaceful transfer of power. But what we saw today was behind the scenes, the unhinged and unstable actions of someone that is just defying what is presidential.
How does it, as a Trump supporter, how does that make you feel? What did you think to watching today's testimony?
It was unnerving. It was unusual, obviously. And look, as we're hearing this and seeing this, it was part gangster. It was part Godfather. It was part Real Housewives of New Jersey as he's throwing food and tossing tables. And here's the thing also that I was really disturbed with is he came into office and exited office with such an obsession with crowd size and the optics of his support that he just did and said things that just defied rational thinking. And to hear today that he was obsessed with the small crowd because many of his supporters were outside the magnetometers with weapons and weren't allowed to be in, and he said, F the mags, F that, F this, bring those people in with their weapons because they're not out to hurt me, but they will eventually walk down to the Capitol and storm the Capitol. That's disturbing.
We should. I mean, the first day in office, you remember the biggest crowd size ever, period, or whatever. What's his name?
John Spicer.
John Spicer said, and who made him do that?
Yeah.
It was Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Ellie, I want to get you in here because I just want to play part of this. Is part of Hutchinson's testimony about what happened after rioters breached the Capitol and White House counsel Pat Cipollone confronted Chief of Staff Mark Meadows. Watch this.
He's still sitting on his phone. And I remember Pat saying to him something to the effect of, the rioters have gotten to the Capitol, Mark. We need to go down and see the president now. And Mark looked up at it and said, he doesn't want to do anything, Pat. And Pat said something to the effect of, and very clearly had said this to Mark, something to the effect of, Mark, something needs to be done or people are going to die and the blood's going to be on your effing hands. This is getting out of control. I'm going down there.
So Trump doesn't want to do anything. What are the legal implications for Trump and for Mark Meadows?
So we've heard this phrase, dereliction of duty, to refer to the notion that Donald Trump sat there and did nothing during those crucial 3 hours. But it's so much worse than that. Dereliction of duty, doing nothing, it's hard to argue that's a crime. But we now know that he did so much more than nothing. He incited that crowd, knowing that they were armed. He did, put aside all the things he did in the preceding weeks to pressure DOJ, to pressure the vice president. And when I heard this testimony from Cassidy Hutchinson today, the bravery of what she did, the enormity of what she did. I mean, the power imbalance. Think about the people she testified about, how experienced they were in Washington, D.C., how much more powerful they were than her. Donald Trump, Pat Cipollone, Rudy Giuliani, Mark Meadows, members of Congress, none of them have talked. And this young woman,
24 years old.
24 years old at the time, 26 now, came forward, stood in front of the cameras in the American public and told the truth. That is a remarkable feat.
Interesting juxtaposition here. Two people there, Mark Meadows, Rudy Giuliani, asked for pardons, and Cassidy Hutchinson testified before a House committee.
Can I ask you something, David? I feel like, look, I think today was significant. But I feel like we keep having the same conversation over and over. As you said, many people knew. Like, but didn't we know this from the very beginning? Wasn't this brought up in the impeachment hearings? And was the country sort of brainwashed in a way, or did we just sort of get used to Donald Trump's antics? Like, day after day, like he would do something, and then 2 minutes to showtime, he would do something crazy, and then we'd have to change the rundown because he did something crazy. Like, did we just kind of get used to it? Because I feel like we're hearing this again, and I've heard this song before.
Yes. In fairness, the impeachment took place after a few weeks of investigation. This was the product of 10 months of investigation, 1,000 interviews, and they have much more information. It would have been interesting to see what happened if the kind of information that we heard today was presented at the impeachment hearings. Of course, they would have been contested as well. But yes, we knew who he was. But some of the stories that were told today were I think beyond what anybody imagined. Let me just say one more word about that young woman who testified today. One of the most poignant moments here, it wasn't one of the big news moments, but was the story about going down to the president's dining room on December 1st after he had read the Attorney General's interview, and he had taken his lunch and thrown it against the wall, and there was the poor valet trying to get the ketchup off the wall, and she said, so I I tried to help him get the ketchup off the wall. And to me, that was sort of symbolic of the whole thing. She's trying to get the stain off of that building and off of our democracy, and she deserves a great deal of credit for that.
I think today she did that somewhat, at least. And we'll see if she continues to get the rest of the stain off. If, what this leads to. Stick around, everyone.